There are people on the social media stuff and in the comments section who are saying, "Oh, you're eating humble pie now because Trump is winning, because has brought Zelensky back to the table, and he is going to produce peace, but at what cost? A peace that that effectively paves the war for a much bigger problem in the future." Yeah. And those people who are coat-tailed to Trump are coat-tailed to a problem. And one of the major characters in that scenario is Farage. Having finally secured a parliamentary seat on his eighth attempt, he finds himself leading Reform UK at a moment when disillusion with the two major parties is at its peak. The parties made significant gains in public support, capitalising on Labour's sluggishness and the Conservatives' implosion under Kemi Badenoch. His brand, brash, populist, anti-establishment, resonates with voters tired of business as usual yet. Here he is, basking in his newfound legitimacy. The spectre of his long-standing association with Donald Trump threatens at this moment to become his Achilles heel. And while Farage has carefully cultivated an image of authenticity, straight talking, I'm not shallow, and down to earth, in contrast to the perceived aloofness of Westminster politicians, his tether to the former and now current US president could prove politically fatal, and he knows it. He's not stupid. He might be shallow. Well, I'm not shallow. Yeah, all right, he's not shallow either. He's not stupid and he's not shallow. But recent polling suggests that while Reform UK's support has grown post-election, its newest backers are more moderate and pragmatic than the die-hard loyalists who simply flock to the party like sheep. Bah, bah. These fresh recruits are frustrated with the system, but they are not ideological purists. And here lies the problem. While many Reform voters might admire Farage's ties to Trump, the broader electorate doesn't. And half of Britons think the phrase Britain's Trump describes Farage well. I'm not shallow. And a mere 19% disagree. Crucially, 49% of all voters believe Farage is in Trump's pocket, the pocket billiard for the White House. And this is not an image that they can afford to carry if Farage wants to broaden Reform's appeal beyond the anti-immigration, anti-woke basis. Even within his own support, the fissures are evident, the fistules of Trump, of Farage. 54% of Reform voters embrace the Trump label, but the wider electorate overwhelmingly recoils from it, and I think that's going to be something that we're going to see get bigger and bigger as his impact on Ukraine is felt in the wide. So in the next week or so, as the Trumpian diktat to withhold intelligence, to withhold arms from Ukraine has its impact, and Putin takes advantage of that. This is rolling the dice in a very alarming way. If it goes well, maybe it will yield something positive, but I think it could easily go badly. And if it does, Farage's association with Trump will be his undoing. And Trump's explosive outburst at Zelensky was widely condemned. Let's not forget that, with Britain's blaming Trump and his vice president, the gerbil, by a margin of 5-1. And Farage, ever the loyal lieutenant, rushed to Trump's defense, but in doing so he miscalculated. His insistence that Zelensky should have worn a suit to appease Trump was not only tone deaf, but out of step with British public sentiment. Even if that's what you might hear on GB News. It's out of step. Support for Ukraine remains strong in the UK, with 70% of Reform voters considering its defence important. Yet Farage's alignment with Trump's scepticism of aid to Kyiv has left him isolated. Criticism of Zelensky might play well in Trumpland, but in Britain it looks petty, spiteful, misjudged. Even Priti Patel, vying for influence on the right, dismissed Farage's take as morally wrong and diplomatically counterproductive. When you're losing a competition on foreign policy judgment to Priti Patel, alarm bells should be ringing. Farage's willingness to adopt Trump's more extreme positions extends beyond these sort of global issues. Reform's approach to climate change, spearheaded by Richard Tice, is another example of ideological overreach that fails to grasp public sentiment. Climate skepticism may be a staple of American populism, but in Britain it's a political dead end. Polling consistently shows that the majority of Britons, 6-1, support investment in renewable energy. Even in Clacton, Farage's new political fiefdom, 68% of voters worry about climate change, and yet Reform is busy railing against net zero, pushing unpopular policies like a tax on renewables. The party is mistaking frustration with the cost of energy transition for outright climate skepticism, and that's a dangerous miscalculation and wrong. And with his Trump problem mounting, Farage has turned to a reliable trick, switching the conversation to an issue that provokes emotional outrage but has limited real-world impact. Inheritance tax and farmers. I'm not shallow. I know how to plough a straight furrow. And it's a classic move. At a moment when Reform's policy contradictions are under scrutiny and his credibility is being tested, Farage, in my impression, by the way, it's not Michael Caine, whatever people suggest. It's Cary Grant as channeled through the film Some Like It Hot. And so that's how I imagine Nigel Farage sitting in a strange chair on the beach, pretending that he's someone else. In Farage's case, he's pretending that he's Trump. If he was sitting in that chair in Some Like It Hot, he'd probably be wedged in. And at the moment when Reform's policy contradictions are under scrutiny and his credibility, even as Tony Curtis, is being tested, Farage shifts the focus to a populist grievance that disproportionately affects the wealthy but stirs up strong feelings. In that, of course, I am sympathetic. I am sympathetic to this one. His pledge to scrap inheritance tax is perfectly timed. Chancellor Rachel Reeves' recent tax reforms, particularly those affecting agricultural property relief, have sparked fury among farmers, how's that for alliteration, and small business owners. And Farage has seized the moment, rallying against double taxation of death duties and painting himself as the champion of hard-working families besieged by the taxman. Never mind that the vast majority of estates do not pay inheritance tax. Never mind that Reform, for all its rhetoric, has not outlined how it would replace the revenue lost by abolishing it. The point is not practical policy, it's optics. And Farage understands optics better than most. I'm not shallow. Farage's future now hinges on a choice. Does he double down on Trumpian disruption, or does he pivot to something more electorally viable? He's built a career on being the outsider, the provocateur. But as history shows, insurgents who actually win power, whether Boris Johnson or Trump himself, have to at least pretend to moderate. Farage's current trajectory suggests he's still caught between these two instincts. He enjoys the shock factor, but he's now in a position where he needs to reassure. And his Trump connection will not disappear, but if he is serious about a longer-term political project, he may have to find a way to redefine that association. For now, the inheritance tax diversion might buy him some time, but in the long run, British voters will have to decide whether they want a reformer or simply another entertainer. And as Farage's friend across the Atlantic is discovering, the tolerance for entertainment in high office is wearing thin.